the 19 teens and 20s, a large number of African Americans moved from the South to other parts of the country. Why did they move? What kind of impact did this have on the nation? In 1900, most African Americans in the United States lived in southern states. In fact, 90% of the African American population still lived in the South. However, many began to move into northern and midwestern states such as Michigan, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and New York. The reasons they were moving varied from family to family. In some cases, they were hoping to find jobs in steel mills, automobile factories, meat packing plants, or working for the railroad. Some were searching for better schools and education opportunities. Others were hoping to escape the racism and violence that African Americans were experiencing in the South. Most who left the South were heading for larger northern cities. Chicago, New York City, Detroit, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland all experienced significant surges in population. For example, in 1910, the African American population of Detroit was approximately 6,000. By 1930, this number had increased to 120,000. Nationwide, only an estimated 740,000 African Americans lived outside of the South in 1900. As the 20th century progressed, this number eventually rose to more than 10 million living in other regions of the country. The Great Migration was one of the largest and fastest movements ever by a group of people who were moving from one part of a nation to another. This is especially true when considering that the movement was not caused by some kind of immediate threat or danger. This migration had many different ramifications for the nation. As black populations rose, many northern cities became increasingly more integrated. African Americans were working alongside recent European immigrants as well as other white residents. These cities also became important centers for African American culture. Newspapers, churches, businesses, and political organizations were all established by African Americans as part of a movement to redefine black culture. Harlem became the center of much of this activity. Musicians, artists, and writers flocked to the area, bringing about the era that would eventually become known as the Harlem Renaissance. There were also some negative impacts of the Great Migration. Many African Americans who moved north did experience racism in their new cities. In some neighborhoods, white residents moved away, having no desire to live with black neighbors. This resulted in some places, such as Harlem, having an almost exclusively black population. Obviously, another significant impact of the Great Migration was the changing demographics of the South. Every southern state experienced a loss in African American population, especially in the rural regions. African Americans made up more than 50% of the populations in both Mississippi and South Carolina. Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia had populations that were more than 40% black. Within just a few decades, these numbers would be reduced to less than 30% in nearly every one of those states.